Brennan, here's $100. Seriously.
Is that all his vote is worth?
No. Yeah. Yes, that's Chicago politics. Yeah. Brennan, I heard you're very meticulous, well done. This is how much we have, and we got 73 cents, and that kind of thing, which is great, and that's good. But you need like a whole lot more money than this. And I would ask people, that's $100 there, and I'm not making much running for president as an independent candidate. Trust me on that. But I would ask you guys to consider before you leave either giving Brennan or Tai Chi money, because that's how these parties work.
Don't give me money. Give him money.
Right, give Brennan money. Okay. But that's how this works. And you know what? I have traveled 250,000 miles in the last 30 years and have campaigned for about 20 years, 100,000 miles. The other part was all research, and I gave up my profession in order to do this. So I have no problem whatsoever walking up to people like Bob and saying, Bob, I need money. Seriously.
He's done it.
Bob gave me this tie. $24.95 for this. Otherwise, I would not be wearing this tie. My average Joe image, ties are just not working real well. But anyway, bottom line is that how the campaign happened is when I went out to do this, I thought, because I'm a journalist, and I know how independents and how more obscure, no offense to the party here, third parties are looked at by journalists. Bob would know that. And so I was really hesitant to do it. But I thought, okay, here's a guy who has spent 10 years, traveled almost 150,000 miles doing this tremendous amount of research for all these platform points. And so as soon as I started sending out news releases, the press was just going to flock to me. And so were people. So, first 3 events I did, I sent out all these news releases, and went to the venue I was going to talk in. Nobody showed up. Nobody. No audience members, no press. I came to find out nobody ran the news releases. And I thought, So the fourth time, I was talking about my wife. My wife is from New Zealand. That's this All Blacks hat thing, and this is a rugby ball up here. That her father keeps bringing them to me, and I don't play rugby, but I say thank you very much, and I take the rugby ball. So, anyway, fourth one, Wilmington, Delaware. I set up this thing on the green in downtown Wilmington. And I had gone out and spent maybe $150 on this little boom box with a microphone. So I got my little boom box set up here, my wife and kids are over here, and I'm just getting ready to give the talk. Nobody again. So, off in the distance, cat-a-corner to where I was at, was 2 bus stops with about 40 people waiting for the bus. And I thought, So I reached out, I picked up the boombox, and I started walking towards the bus stop. And my wife is like, you're not really going to do that, are you? And I was so determined. At that point, I just marched myself over to the bus stop, and I stood in front of these poor people, too, and started giving the speech. And it started going over really well. Like, people were listening and whatever, and then the buses showed up. And then there was just 3 people, because one of the buses hadn't got there yet, The point being is that I started to find out early on in the campaigning that I might need to be a little more proactive because of how third parties and independent candidates are viewed. Now, there's no problem. You can get, if you're an independent, you can get some small market internet media. That's not, if you got an independent leading independent media, they'll say, yeah. But the only problem is a lot of times there's just like 30, 40 people listening to the show. So there's a catch-22 in that thing. even though it looks good and sounds good in the archives and the party, you know, that kind of thing, but you're not reaching that many people. So anyway, what happened was we were doing this original 13 Colonies tour, and so our next stop was we drove down to Savannah, Georgia. Anybody ever been in Savannah? Kind of a big city, nice trees actually. I kind of like this. So I go to the, there's probably maybe 100, 150,000 people that live in Savannah. It's a pretty big town. And I go to the newspaper office. I've come to find out that if you just send the news release, because I'm a journalist and I've kind of seen this happen, it's either going to be in an email box or on a desk of an editor, and he's not. It's going to get buried somewhere, and they're not going to pay attention. You know. So I thought, well, okay, since it's not working that way, I walked into the newspaper office and I went to the 3rd floor. I walked right up to the editor's desk, and I said, "Hi, my name's Joe Schriner, and I'm running for president, and I'm doing an event downtown tomorrow in Savannah, and would like you to cover the event." And I put a news release on his desk. He looked up at me and he goes, "I'm sorry, Mr. Schriner, but we're not really doing anything with the election right now." This was campaign 2000, this is how far back this was. And so I said, well, gee, if I was like George Bush, my guess is you'd be doing something, right? And he looked up and real rationally he said, yeah, if you were George Bush, we'd be doing something, but you're not George Bush. And I'm like, well, how unfair is that? And I started to, say a bunch of stuff, and like I should have as much access to the media as Mr. Bush, which is crap, because he's got like way more of a following. So the truth is, there's a reason those guys get covered, But I went on for a little while, and finally they just kind of politely said they weren't going to do anything. This is where God comes in. This is where God comes in. That evening, I take my kids for a walk along the Riverwalk down there. Beautiful, actually. It's really nice. And here's this guy with a bunch of cameras around his neck. And I walked up to him, I said, you wouldn't happen to be a photographer for the Savannah Morning Journal, or whatever it's called. He goes, yeah, as a matter of fact, I am. We're just doing some feature shots of the Riverwalk, that kind of thing. I said, would you like to take a picture of the Almost First Family? Now, this guy's looking at me like I'm from Mars. And I said, just wait right here. And so he does, and I go back to our campaign vehicle, and I get an article that had, in a small town paper, there had been an article about us. So I came back and I showed it to him, and this guy's like, well, this is kind of cool. So he takes a bunch of pictures of us. I wait about 45 minutes to an hour, and then I call the editor, who's still in the office because it comes out in the morning and they have an evening deadline, that kind of thing. And so I get a hold of him, and I said, have you talked to your photographer? And he goes, yeah, he came back, explained what had happened. And I said, well, are you going to use the pictures? And he goes, no. But he goes, I'll tell you what, if you stop bugging us, we'll do a story. Honest to God. So
the bribe was your absence.
Yeah. You're not going to be with our PR department, Mike. So the next day, we do this little whistle stop thing, is what we called it, in this little square in downtown Savannah, and they send a reporter and a photographer. The next day in the Savannah Morning News, and I have made it small just to fit on this, this was on the front page.
Yes.
Color picture, and it was a lot bigger than that actually. It was right up towards the top. I thought, this is how this thing works. In order to get coverage, I'm going to have to be extremely proactive. That was 1,000 media spots ago. I mean, you guys have seen the table, and that's just a small amount of the stuff that has happened. The reason that I'm telling this story is because I have found that for you guys, the party, to get attention, you're going to need to be as proactive as the day is long. As a good example, William, Pelicans and Pancakes, right? William calls me, we're going to Toledo, we're going to do this Pelicans and Pancake thing. Okay? I asked him who was going to come. He said, well, I got a couple people I've emailed and that kind of thing. And I've come to find that those emails and these things are kind of like the editor's desk. You know, and so we made a couple follow-up calls that night to people that might be coming. And I had called an editor who had done a story about us in a diocesan paper, who is now the editor in the town that we were going to be in. And I said, you know, we're doing this thing. She remembered me. Then I called these people and said, you know, the press is going to do something. And the combination of being as extremely proactive as possible, there were only 5, 6 people that showed up for the pancake breakfast. But this was, instead of the Washington Post reporter, we got the busboy to take a picture. Following week, ASP meets in Perrysville, Ohio. So we parlayed that little event into reaching thousands of people in Perrysburg. Same thing, David, where you at? David left, whatever. With those county fairs. There's another perfect example where it's not just about doing the booth, it's about trying to be as proactive. You know, we're going to be in the area, we're doing this fair kind of thing. Would you be interested in doing a story on us? And so how you build the party, I believe, is by parlaying this stuff into more with God's grace. Because that's the other component in what's happened with us. And Christopher Zender is the perfect example of that. You want to tell a story or you want me to tell a story?
What story is that?
The one on the desert?
Oh. Yeah, I was, our family, we were living in California at the time, a place called the Hatchet in the mountains. Went down to this local parish, St. Mary's in Mojave, pretty miserable town, Mojave. And at the end of Mass, the priest said, we have a presidential candidate who's going to speak to us. And I thought, madman.
That's how the press looks at that.
No, well, yeah. So he, at the time I was editor of a Catholic monthly. So I thought, I just got to stay away from this fellow because he obviously wanted me to interview him. So I listened to his spiel, and it said nothing that was particularly crazy. It was good enough, but still I thought, this guy's crazy, running for president. So I said to a friend of mine afterwards, we were going to coffee donuts, I said, don't tell him I'm a journalist. So we're down drinking coffee, eating donuts, and I was studiously trying not to get his attention.
You were.
Yeah, I was not. So at one moment I glanced over and his wife Liz caught my eye and she came right over to talk to me. And she was such an intelligent woman, and she said they were going to talk about farm worker issues in the Central Valley, which was a topic I was very fascinated with at the time. And I thought, well, maybe there's something here that is not revealed by Joe. So,
yeah, go ahead, embellish more.
well, what ended up happening is what they did is they had this van, they traveled a lot, book for Joe on the side, they'd take advantage of people's hospitality and hook up their vans to their house and get electricity and stay there. So we had 5 acres in the mountains, so I said, why don't you come up and stay there? And they ended up staying there, and I actually got to know Joe wasn't crazy. I had enjoyed, we had long conversations with each other, and I have a madness, I tend to detect it because I come from California. I've known a lot of people.
We're crazy.
Yeah, you get sort of PTSD these things. But so yeah, but that was how I wrote an article on it.
And Christopher wrote the longest article that's ever been written about the campaign out of anyone, and it was excellent. It was actually.
It had nothing to do with Joe, it's just I'm long-winded.
You are a little. Okay. So, the last story, and then very briefly, I'll share the party building thing, but I had no intention of running for president. Absolutely not. I mean, I always thought people that did that were nuts. You know, even the Democrats and Republicans. But in my particular case, I got this thing. I used to be, besides being a journalist, I was a counselor. I had a private counseling practice back in Cleveland. I was doing really well, and right in the middle of that whole thing, I got this thing very strongly in prayer. I was supposed to give that up and to go out on the road. And I thought, you're really nuts. But I did. And I phased the counseling practice out, and I went out. For the next 8 to 9 years, I get these little providential promptings. I was supposed to go to a town. And in a day, maybe 2, in a church, in a coffee shop, at a YMCA, somewhere, I would meet somebody doing this absolutely wonderful project to stop abortion, to help the environment, to help the poor, to help with racial justice. It was just absolutely phenomenal. And I would just use my journalism background and write stuff down. That was it. Not knowing why God was doing that, but over time it became clear to me that if you plug these things, you know, I was talking about this other talk with abortion, if you took all those crisis pregnancy things and you plugged them into every county in the country, the safety net would be phenomenal. And so after the 8, 9 years, got this thing to settle, this little town we did. I was writing a column for some newspapers. And then I started getting, I was supposed to run for president and take that information and share it with other people and use running for presidency as a vehicle to do that. And then I thought I was really nuts. And the end of that story is, for 3 months I wouldn't do it. And God kept giving me in prayer. I was being like Jonah on the boat going the other way. And so, we had a spiritual advisor who was a priest out in California. And I called him, I said, Father, I'm getting this thing, I'm supposed to run for president. Total silence on the other end of the phone. He goes, Joe, I'm not even going to talk to you about it. I'll give you a call back in about a week. I just need to pray about it and ruminate about it a little bit. So a week later, the phone rings. He goes, you know what? I'm not even supposed to talk to you about this. Before Mass this morning, I got this very audible thing from God that was, tell him to go. Now, I didn't tell him anything about Jonah or anything like that. And he stops and he goes, and the reading today was Jonah. Does that mean anything to you? I looked at my wife and I go, I guess we're doing this. So that was the beginning of this odyssey. With the accent on odd sometimes, you know. But we believe very strongly that there's this design happening with this thing. You know, God's opened so many doors in so many different ways. So, to go back to the party and this grassroots party building, you guys have God's plan. Anybody who reads the Bible cannot come away from that and read our platform and say, gee, this is different than what that says. I mean, this is just totally on the mark. So, the bottom line is that kind of like we've been, you guys need to really be all in on this. Not tangentially, all in. Which means donating $100 or whatever. You know, it means going to those fare booths and trying to make the most possible of that. It means putting on, I love the sandwich board thing, that was great. It means being kind of a fool for God. Because see, in this political, he hasn't pulled us out of this political climate. The political climate is a cacophony of pop culture noise. And to have a voice in that, because we can, you know, I hear so often in here, and it's only because I've been out there doing all this for so long, the thing about, well, we just need to be cultured and steady and just even with what we present and the whole thing. You know, and that's wonderful, and that's good, like, kind of ideological platform kind of stuff. But you need to get attention. And God, it's like the loaves and fishes. As you move into that arena and be all sold out and do those kind of things, God will multiply that just like he's done with all the stuff we've done. And here's the pitch for my campaign. You need a point person who can get some attention. And when that attention happens, there needs to be a narrative behind it. Otherwise, it would be at best a 15 minutes of fame kind of thing. It would be a blip on the media radar. So, but because we have this whole history, here's the sales pitch. People are going to look at that and say, my God, this guy has really been serious about this. Last thing, because there's so many people that are so afraid of that little average Joe deal. Oh, they're going to look at us as what a... How did Trump get in the White House? He was what? An outsider. Even though he readily admitted he paid billions of dollars on both sides of the fence in order to get what he wanted for his businesses. How outside is that? But what about this average family in Bluffton, Ohio? The guy cuts his own grass, changes his oil. Just kind of a normal, average guy. You think if God sparked that, this might actually become a national story? Because I didn't come up with that concept. Fourth campaign event, it was cold. I had on a flannel shirt and some jeans. Porter looked at me and he goes, so, what's an average Joe like you doing running for president? Just stuck. Just stuck. So, I'd love to be looked at as the next kind of guy out of the Ivy League with all this heady stuff, but that's not going to sell. And anyway, the guys coming out of the Ivy League, if they were being taught the right stuff, would we have all the problems we're having right now? No. You need a guy with common sense for the common good. So, that's it. But it's up to you guys to be as proactive as possible with this. This 10% that's in here, so to speak, so impressed with you guys as far as people doing stuff to try and make this more prolific. Because otherwise, it's just going to lie fallow. So, anyway, God bless you guys. Thanks.